Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. It's always good to see faces. Lately, I've been sitting with the Heart Sutra, and we say the Heart Sutra every morning, and it's said daily all across the world every day. And it's relatively short, but it's a negation of the 5 aggregates and the 12 links of causation, and really focusing on kind of the Mahayana aspect of the teaching, with a strong emphasis on emptiness. And in some of my other talks, in my last talk, I talked about ritual as a way to kind of give up the self and to keep on letting go. And it's not necessarily pretending that you don't exist or pretending that you don't matter. We have some kind of wrong views sometimes, or wrong thoughts about what emptiness is. But it's more of the decentralizing of the self and putting it in the correct relationship with everything else. And it's also kind of saying that there's emptiness isn't just what emptiness is. Emptiness isn't voidness, although they do use that term too, but it's just void of this existing self. And for the first paragraph of the Heart Sutra, it starts out with Avalokiteshvara coming to this realization and telling Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. Form itself is emptiness. Emptiness itself form. Sensations, perceptions, formations, and consciousness are also like this. So this is kind of a little shortcut. She brings in all the 5 aggregates or skandhas. And the skandhas, directly translated, means kind of a heap or a bundle. And that's kind of what we are. We're heaps and bundles of different things. But in Buddhism, and particularly the Theravadan Buddhism, before Mahayana, they concentrated on the 5 aggregates as ways of, they thought of them as ways that you can be caught in samsara through these things. And the Heart Sutra is saying, forget about it. These things aren't ultimately important, and they're ultimately not real, but they're still here. So they're mentioned in the Heart Sutra, but what are these aggregates in particular? So we have form, the world of form, matter, the stuff that we're kind of made of, the things that actually are. We think of forms as those things out there, but we have our own forms too. And we can't really know a lot about form itself, because we can only perceive what form is through our own experience, and that experience is quite limited, and it has to deal with perception, and which is another one of the 5 aggregates, but perception itself in humans is quite weird. I have the fortune of being in a scientific field where they do a lot of testing about how we see things and how we hear things, what's actually going on in the brain and in the body. It's really interesting, and it's really not what we thought. It's kind of strange. The second aggregate is sensations. The second one listed is sensations. And that's just the experience that we have of the forms. Everything that kind of comes up, we experience that. And we experience it not through our mind so much as it is just through our body. Everything that we have ever thought, everything that we've ever felt, we've done it inside this thing, inside the body. I tend to think of form as things that are out there. And when I touch things, I'm touching things that are external. Um, so sensations being the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the touches, and also the thoughts, but we can get to that. And seeing things. And I think of everything as, you know, these things out there that are coming to me. But really, if you kind of look at it a little more closely, we don't see things. I'm not seeing the building across the street. I'm seeing the light from the building being processed by me. It has to reach me in order to do that. It has to go in. I have to experience it. The same with the traffic outside. I can only assume that it's traffic. I can't see it. I can hear it, and the noise has to reach me in order for me to know that it's even happening. So that doesn't mean that the traffic isn't there, that it doesn't have its own thing. It's just that my experience of it is a sensation, and by itself is, they don't last. They are not ultimately what is actually happening, what is actually real. It's just my body's interpretation of it. The next one would be perception. This is the recognition part of being. It's a labeling. It's often the step where we label things. So I see a shape and a color, and I label them, of course, shape and color. But I say that this is a green leaf because this is my experience of the world, or it's a white elephant, or whatever it is. And this happens really quickly, really, really fast. And as an example of the traffic again, try hearing a car go by and not think of something, either car, traffic, pollution, I'm late for work, whatever it is, things come up. And along with this labeling, there's okay, I misspoke about that. I'll go on to formations. Formations, also sometimes called mental formations or volition. This is that sense that we have that we need to do something. It's a kind of an action. So when we're sitting in zazen and I feel an itch, the sensation of an itch, I label it an itch, or I think it's a bug or something like that. I have an urge to scratch it. I have an urge to shoo the fly. I have an urge to do something. And this is kind of a formation. And it is part of the mental activity. It arises, it goes away. And we can see all these things. Again, these things happen pretty quick. And the last one is consciousness. The fifth aggregate is consciousness, is awareness with discernment. Consciousness has a large definition. And I think we could talk about consciousness for some people have done it for lifetimes. But in this kind of smaller venue, consciousness is sometimes known as judgment or discernment. And so I'm going to abbreviate that right there for that. So these aggregates are seen as, like I said before, ways of getting caught. And that means to me that I can give too much weight to what I see or what I hear, start to think that it's real, and I can get caught in samsara for that, cause my own suffering by thinking that something is true as an actual thing, and then it turns out to be something else, or I want it to be different than what it is. And this is part of how suffering is caused. And the other way to look at aggregates is the way of seeing that there's no self. So each of these kinds of, they're not necessarily steps, but I view them as stages of things. there's no abiding self in any one of those things, because each of those things as a piece of us doesn't abide. Everything is changing all the time, moment to moment. So when we look deeply at these things, we can start to see that they are indeed empty of a permanent abiding thing. And if each of these things has no permanent abiding thing, there is no self that is permanent and abiding. So the interdependent origination is just that all things kind of arise together. We're all in this together. It's kind of a cliche, but we kind of are. And this is what the meaning of emptiness is trying to get across. So I went ahead and fleshed out the abbreviation in that first paragraph. And it gets repetitive and long, as some chants do get repetitive and long. And if you've read from the Pali Canon, that's also a nice way that the oral tradition was transmitted, by repetition, by numbering, that kind of thing. And like I said, I've been sitting with this for a little while now, and there's really, to me, there's something there. There's something there. We talk about form and emptiness a lot. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And we're kind of, to me, I'm stuck on form and emptiness, right? But it's not form and emptiness. It's form and emptiness, sensations and emptiness, perceptions and emptiness, formations and emptiness, consciousness and emptiness. And each of these things, as we go through it, it's just, oh man, that's emptiness too. That's emptiness too. But by saying the Heart Sutra every day, we kind of gloss over that. We kind of forget that sensations, perceptions, and formations are also like this. We don't spend the time to really feel what it's like that sensations, perceptions, and formations are also like this. Sensations do not differ from emptiness, and emptiness does not differ from sensation. Sensation itself is emptiness, emptiness itself sensation. And sometimes when I go through that and I can hold it, I kind of scream a little inside, because I'm feeling a lot of stuff, and how can it all be emptiness? And then how can it not all be part of everything at the same time? And that's kind of a little joyous. So I'm kind of explaining that we can feel this in our bodies. And at first we do this when we quiet our minds through Zazen. I use that as a time of reflection a lot. Maybe a lot of people do, I don't know. And so we slow down and we start to see each of these kinds of, if you want to call them stages, each of these aggregates as a thing in itself. We get to recognize when things are coming up, when you are labeling things, when you do feel that urge to act, to move, to plan, to start thinking about things. And it's really hard until we start to slow down to see where these things are happening and when these things are happening. But after a while of sitting and getting familiar with how these things feel in our bodies, slowing down, seeing them come up over and over again, then we can do these things also every day when we're working, when we're walking, when we're dealing with their kids, when we're going to the bathroom, when we're buying groceries. It's in our lives. And I always kind of come back to, well, how does just knowing these things, how does, feeling these things help us? every day in our life. And especially as somebody who's up here giving a talk, it's how is this important? What does this mean to me when I have things to do? I have my life to live. One thing is that experiencing in the body is always a good place to start. Many things that go on, I think the body takes in a lot more than the mind can process. That is, I think, pretty apparent in how we encode memories. We can't remember every single thing that happens, but our body does recognize, feel, and see and hear every single thing that happens. There's a bit of validation, knowing that some of the experience that we've had correlate with these aggregates. Okay, sometimes I've had a sensation where I just have this sensation and there's no thoughts afterwards. Am I messed up for doing that? No, maybe you're just at a place where sensations, you're able to let the sensations just be what they are. You don't have to do anything about them, but you're aware of them. You can bring your awareness to it. And doing this as a practice has a lasting effect on our lives. For me, I've kind of seen it as a roadmap. Hey, I'm doing it right. Things are kind of going along here and I kind of get it. I feel like I'm going the right way. And I also feel like there's a lot more to explore with this. So there's a couple of things about, I'm up here talking about things and it makes sense to me. It might not make sense when it comes out. I can apologize for that or just be aware that that might not make sense to everybody. And as I'm preparing for my talk today, I just subscribed to Tricycle Magazine, and on the advice of a friend. And so I get their little daily things in the email. And as far as teaching and this path that I took to be a teacher, the quote today seemed a little apt for me. It says, "Through the magic of reflecting on the teachings, their force, sometimes clear, sometimes obscure, will cause ferment in our minds from which we can gradually distill the wisdom of reflection." That was Lama Jumpa Tai. And somebody I don't know anything about. But when I ask these questions about how does knowing the aggregates help us every day, this kind of thing is comforting to know that it can sit in our minds and ferment and cause change. A lot of times it's hard for me to talk about the Dharma. Besides it being sometimes subtle and elusive and mysterious or whatever we want to put about it, these feelings that are in here, these experiences that I have that I want to share with people somehow, no matter the words that I put to them, they're not enough. They're not enough words to convey the experience. Like I said, the body takes in everything. It feels everything, and I can't explain that. to you. You can't explain your experience to me. And I was having a conversation with a student of Katagiri's, and they told me that after a talk, Katagiri would not feel good about it, in the way that he was not able to say what he means, not just from the Japanese to English, but also from trying to put words to the indescribable, is how I think of it. But he gave him anyway. And sometimes I think that it's part of the path that I've chosen. It's also something that I want to do. I have a quote from him here, because then I found it in this The Light That Shines Through Infinity book. Sometimes I want to stop talking and be quiet, but wherever I may go, people constantly ask me to talk. I am a teacher, so I cannot escape this suffering. That's pretty hard, but this is a very good lesson for me. What is the lesson? Whatever happens, there is always an opportunity to return to real silence. So I don't understand the lesson that he's taking from it. I know there's a lesson there for me. As I reflect on the aggregates and how I experience them and how I experience the emptiness or voidness or not being independentness of each of those aggregates, I think it changes me, and it makes me want to do more. Well, I think that's enough. Thank you for your kind attention. And if you would like to say anything,